Good morning and welcome to this morning's webinar. My name is David Durston and today we're going to be talking about SolidWorks macros. So the first question I suppose is, can everybody hear me? If you can't, if you could just raise your hand. Excellent, that's a good sign. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump into SolidWorks now and we're going to start having a look at some macros. So first of all, I've got a drawing up, it's got an assembly in it. I've created an additional toolbar in all my parts, my assemblies and my drawings so I can get to my macros quickly. And we'll have a look at creating a macro button a little bit later on. But first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to demonstrate some macros of some various different types. So the first macro I want to talk about is one that a few people have asked for. In fact, I got asked about whether this was possible earlier in the week and thought, as I've got the webinar coming up, I'd make it happen. So the question was, how do I get my properties from my model documents, be they parts or assemblies, and put them as custom properties in my SolidWorks drawing so that they're available to search in Workgroup? So I create a macro to do it. And what this does is this will replicate all of my Workgroup properties from my part into my drawing. So just to demonstrate it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete all of the properties in my drawing, hit OK, and click my button, so macro copy workgroup properties. I click that, literally no time in the background, come back to the properties, and it's recreated all of those, that number, description, revision, author, project, and status for me. So macros can be really powerful at moving data around from file to file, as well as creating information as well. So this is just a very quick macro I created, like I said, for this webinar, and I'm going to send it off to the customer later on today. So that's one very quick macro. Second one, we've got a bill of materials set up, we've got a whole load of information in it, and I've got this export bomb. Click the button. This one takes a little bit longer to run, but what it's doing is it's going and collecting all of the information from the bill of materials. It's creating an Excel document. It's then adding that information to the Excel document and formatting the Excel document for me as well. So if I just jump in here, and in this particular case, this macro creates the Excel documents into my C drive, although of course that would be editable. Double click, and it's created the Excel document and formatted the Excel document to match the bill of materials. So we've got item number, part number, material, and quantity. So again, relatively simple macro, but very useful and potentially very powerful if you do a lot of that yourself. You're always saving things out of CSV and then having to format the bill of materials. This can save you quite a lot of time. So let's go and have a look at some assembly macros. First of all, I'm just going to open up the assembly from that drawing. And we've got two here. Now these are both ones that I drag down from the internet, and I'll show you some resources where I often go and have a look and see if there's something similar to what I want. The first one brings up an interface, a separate dialog, and allows you to have a look at the bill of materials of the assembly that's on your screen. And then you can have a look at the different levels, if there are different levels. There aren't for this particular assembly. We can have a look at all of the configurations, in which case it will go through and create a bill of materials for each configuration. It will allow you to search for particular items. So if I have a look for upstand, we hit first, it will show me where they are on the item, and then we can come back up to the top and search through. So if you have a very long bill of materials, it enables you to search through it there, and it allows you to export it again to Excel. So essentially this is sort of a front end on the front of what I showed you from the drawing point of view. Like I say, this was one I downloaded from the internet, so if you want it, feel free to ask, I'll pass it on. But it does come with the usual disclaimer that it comes as is. It's not something I've had a lot of input into. There's another one here which a lot of customers may have seen. It's been hanging around on the web for quite a long time. And what this does, not very helpful as an error message. What this does is it allows you to select a folder and then save all of the drawings, or convert all of the drawings in that folder to DXF. Again, this is one that I've seen from various sources actually, so I can't tell you straight off what those error messages are. But it basically is a way of converting a large number of SolidWorks drawings to DXF without having to worry about it too much. It's very similar, I suppose, to the task scheduler, but of course you don't need the task scheduler, so you don't need SolidWorks Professional in order to actually run this macro. So it can be a bit of a time saver there as well for you guys. I'm now going to open up a part which I've got here, and we're going to have a look at some part macros. The first one is a really simple one that a customer asked for. He has a workflow where he will tend to be looking at weird angles on stuff, and he wants to be able to very quickly create a name view. And he doesn't want to have to go space, type in a name. He just reuses the same name view over and over again. So we've got a macro for it. Click the button, and then I can go to wherever I want to go, hit the space bar, and I've got this AB temp, which is the guy's initials. Click that, and it takes me back to the name view I've saved. And if I then decide actually I want to work at a different angle, we click the button again, and now we've got our new save view. So this was just something which helped him with his workflow, made his life a lot easier because he doesn't have to keep pressing space, typing a name, blah, blah, blah. He can just click the button and it will create the view looking at whatever he was looking at, enables him to rotate things around and go back to that name view very easily. So it's just a very quick time saver. Again, this is what macros tend to be for, is ways of saving you time or doing something automatically which would take you time. Now we're going to have a look at, so these have been some pretty simple, quick macros we've looked at so far. Now we're going to have a look at some stuff that's a bit longer. So this is another one that a customer asked for. They do quite a lot of stuff where they take a panel and they add laminate edging to it. And they don't want to have to model without the laminate edging. They want to be able to model at the full size and then apply the edging afterwards. So there's a very simple cupboard here. And it's been made into a cut list using the weldment functionality, and it's a multi-body part. So what this macro enables you to do is we hit here, it brings up a dialog box, and basically it's selected an item. These are both the same, which is why they're both selected, and it's asking me whether the panel is edged or not. So do I want to put a laminate strip on it? I'm going to say yes. It's then giving me some extra options, and it's going to say what edges are edged. In this case, it's the S stands for short and the L stands for long. So we have one short edge, both short edges, one long edge, both long edges, and then the other combinations as well. Now, this being a shelf, I'm going to assume that the front is edged, and that is a short edge. You have to know your model reasonably well, obviously. And then we're going to say the edging thickness is 2 mil. The grain direction is just so that we know which is the long edge and which is the X dimension and which is the Y dimension, because the grain always goes in the X dimension. And then we say OK, and it adds some properties. Now, it's now come up, the same thing is selected, and this because it is selected the second body of the same type. I don't want to have to type the details again and again, so I can hit already done. We now get a different object. In this case, I'm going to say that everything is edged, and actually this edging is going to be a 3 mil edging. And the grain direction is along, that's fine. Same body's been selected, so we'll say already done. Is the panel edged? Yes, but it's only one long edge, and this is going to be a, let's go with a 4 mil edging. Say OK, same situation, we've already done. And then we've got the back panel, and if we rotate, or if we had a look at it, we'd see the back panel is all in board, so there's no edging at all, and we're just going to say OK to that. Now, nothing appears to have happened, but in the cut list, we have a large number of properties that have now been associated to the item. So we've got length, width, thickness, grain direction, the name, and the edged faces. And as we flick through, we can see the different values. Now, this length and width, what I've done in the part is measured the body, which came out as 600 by 300 by 12, but because I edged it on one long face, with a 4 mil thickness, my width has been reduced by 4. So although the part size that when I'm modelling is full size, if I ever recorded these properties into a weldment cut list on my drawing, what comes out in the cut list is an actual cut size of the material for the guys on the shop floor. So they can cut it to size and then edge it. So very quickly we can get these properties out, and it then helps us populate a bill of materials further down the line, which saves a lot of time for the engineers. They don't have to go through and say, right, this part, that part, the other part, right, that's a 4 mil edging, and now I need to reduce all the sizes. But also, because it's very easy to run, it means if you make edits to your part, you rerun the macro, and all your weldment cut lists are back up to date. So again, this was a time-saving exercise for this customer. If we jump back into, oh, no, I didn't mean to do that. If we jump back into an assembly for a very, very quick second, here we've got an assembly with an assembly sketch, and what this customer wanted to do was create they'd have a sketch like this, and then they want to create a series of parts that represent these individual shapes. Now, these were for decking panels. So we say we're going to do a decking panel, and then there were two different ways to create a panel depending on whether it's an easy rectangle or whether you were doing something a little bit more complicated. So we've got this form which tells you what's going to happen and what's going on. I'm going to go with a non-standard shape. We then need to select a number of edges, as it says, selecting them in consecutive order, and then we say create deck. Now, this is going to ask for a part number, and this format I'm using is because of the format the customer requested, and we hit OK, and then we just watch it get on with it. So you can see it creating a sketch, and it's going to create some parts, and then it's going to finish by creating those two entities. And then I could carry on, and I could now say, right, I now want to do one over here. We're going to select these items, and we're going to do the next panel, if that makes sense. In this case, I'm not going to. I'm going to click cancel and exit. But what's happened is it's created two components here for me. And if we zoom in, what we can see is we've got a frame around the outside, which has been done as a structural member for a weldment. And we've also got a boss extrude, which is a wooden panel on the front. And the next step for this macro is not actually finished yet for these guys, is to apply materials for them and then put both of the components into a sub-assembly, which is just how they like their bill of materials to look. So we've had a look at several macros. They vary in complexity from one which is literally one page of code, which copies properties from the part into the drawing. We've gone in and had a look, and like this brilliant deck one is a much more complicated macro, which is creating parts based on other information you're giving it. We have the one in the part, which was measuring all of the entities so we could populate a weldment cut list. And then we had the ones that I downloaded, which enabled you to browse through the assembly bill of materials and also create a whole load of DXFs. So sort of an outside SolidWorks set of actions, if it makes sense. So what would you do if you want to create a macro? The macros I've run through don't show what you want to see something else. Well, the first thing is you can record your own macros. We have the macros toolbar turned on down here in the bottom left, and this enables you to record macros of a series of actions that you do. But before you dive in and start recording stuff, what you can do is have a look online and see if somebody's already released an open source version which does what you want. So where can you look? Well, there's a few resources that I often go to. There's this resource by Lenny. He has a whole load of macros that do all sorts of different bits and pieces. We've also got a guy called Larono who also releases some stuff. I've used quite a few of his. They do some really nice stuff. Occasionally what happens is you'll find there's more, or the macros are more complicated if you go and want to look and edit them, but that's because all of these guys are trying to account for a lot more options than you or I would, because you know what the macro does, you know when you click the button you've got to have these things selected. Whereas if you're doing a sort of professional, in inverted commas, macro, then you have to be a lot smarter with how you lay it out so that it copes with everybody not understanding the exact code. And then finally we've got Angel 6. This guy does all sorts of stuff which is completely not related to SolidWorks stuff, but he also does a whole load of SolidWorks macros. And these are really nice macros. If they do what you want, they are absolutely tip-top. So yeah, I would recommend having a look here so that you can see what's going on. He does all sorts of different bits and pieces. And all of these places, they may ask you to register to download, but all of them are free for use within companies. So have a look for those guys. These are just three that I know I've used in the past. Feel free to just look online, type in SolidWorks macros, and you will get more hits than you know what to do with. But like I say, check these three guys out. They're all pretty handy. If these don't do what you want to do, so you start recording some of your own things, it's still not working quite how you wanted, where can you find out more information? Well, SolidWorks do a website which is absolutely spot on. It has all of the stuff in. Sometimes finding exactly what you want, you're using the wrong terminology, so on, can be a little bit annoying. Take my word for it, it can be a little bit annoying. But it does have everything in there. All of the visible APIs are listed here. And it goes into great detail. You can search for them individually through this, but I would recommend using the search tool. That brings up a whole load of results, and you can dig through and find stuff out like that. The SolidWorks API, what's built in and what we look at and what I tend to do most of is all the VBA stuff, but it does also allow you to write the macros and the add-ins in both VB.NET and the Visual C family of code. But like I say, the easiest one and the one which it records the macros in is the VBA. So that's the one I talk about and the ones that what I do stuff in. So we've had a look at where you can look some existing macros up, where you can get all your API information. But before you really want to dive into the API, generally you want to record something that does something similar to what you want so that you can see it and then say, well, actually, that is the bit of code I want to copy and go on. So we're going to have a look at recording a macro now. And then having a look at the code that it produces and also what it can do for us. So what we're going to do is we're going to start recording a macro. Very simple, macro toolbar up. Let's choose record pause macro. So we're going to choose record. I don't want to actually make any operations to this, but the reason I want to click record now is then it means that all the steps are done. So my macro is going to start by creating me a new part document. I'm then going to do some sketches, so let's sketch on the top plane, and we're going to put a circle in. You have to tell me when you recognize what it is. We're then going to extrude that, which is it, very nice and easy. We're then going to put a sketch on the front face. Again, we're going to draw some circles, and we're going to start positioning these. And I'm going to the middle deliberately because then I can add a vertical relation, and then we're going to start adding some dimensions. Now the reason I'm having to type into my dimension box each time is not because I think that's the preferred way to work, but when I demonstrate this macro in a second, I want to make sure I've got the option to enter dimensions turned off. And the reason behind that is it will then allow me to run it straight through without it asking me what the dimension is going to be. Right, and then finally we're going to have let's just finish this off. I won't be a second, guys. I know this bit's a bit boring watching me model, particularly as it's not an incredibly thrilling model. And then the final dimension, let's make that 35. Oh, no, I don't need that one. Apologies. So we've added all of our sketch items in. I'll just make that a final cut. Hit the tick. And now we can see I've made myself a smiley face, and I've been recording all the whole time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit stop. It's then going to ask me whether I want to save it. And in this case, I'm going to save it into the folder where I've done my webinar. And I'm going to save it over the top of macro 1 and hit save. So I've now got my part. What I can actually do now is I can close this document. I don't need it. The macro is going to recreate it. Now I did say that I'd show you how to create a macro button. Now seems the appropriate point to do it, to run our macro. So rather than clicking run and finding the macro, I'm going to create a button to do that for me. So we need to customize our menu. We then need to go to the commands, the macro commands, and drag in this new macro button, drag that onto my toolbar, and it'll pop up a box asking me which macro is this button going to run. It's going to run macro 1, which I just created. It then asks which method within macro 1 is going to run. If you've got several methods that can start, you can then pick which method within the macro So, for example, that brilliant decking macro, I think there's 4 or 5 runnable macros in there. You just have to, you can have 4 or 5 buttons attached to different bits of it. You can then choose an image. Now, images are just bitmap images, and those bitmap images, as long as they are square, you can put them in, which is how I've got things like this JT, and I had another one earlier that said ACE, and there was a D for the decking macro. The default picture is this, but you can go off and choose any square image. Generally, I recommend having a normal sort of icon size, so 32 by 32 pixels or 16 by 16 pixels. But you can go a lot bigger than that if you want to have really nice detailed images like this. It depends how much patience you have in creating the pictures. You then have a tooltip. So I'm going to change this so it says create smiley, and then you have a prompt which is sort of the expanded tooltip. So we're going to hit OK to that, and the tooltip appears, and if I hover we can see the tooltip and the expanded tooltip. And then I hit OK. Now to run my macro, as I said, I could come down here, click Run Macro, go and browse to my macro and run it, and that's fine if you're only running the macro once. But if you're going to run the macro several times, so for example if I need to create a smiley every time I need to cheer myself up, then we can click Create Smiley. So if I click it, there. It will go through the steps that I did in order to create my various different items, and as we can see I've obviously not got some of my mates in the right place because it's not created the sketch right. So it may be a question of editing the macro, or it might be a question of re-recording it, depending on how complex your model is. Now you might say, why would we re-record a model? Well, first of all, let's go and have a look at the code. I think it's probably the easiest thing. So if I choose Exit Sketch, and we will record or go and have a look at the macro. So let's choose to edit it, choose macro 1, and we've got a whole load of stuff, and it looks very complicated, and in some cases it is quite complicated, but this goes through and does it. So somewhere I've missed a relation, or I've missed a dimension when I was creating my model which wasn't recorded properly in the macro. So this is what the macro looks like, and I've got loads of them open, as you can see at the moment. And this is all the macros that I've got loaded into SolidWorks. So these are all the different macros. Now, I said, why would we want to create a part in a macro like I was trying to do my smiley face? Now, the reason I might want to create a part is if I go and I want to give people my documents in a very small format, or if people are downloading documents from a website so that they can reuse your parts, you want to keep the file size as small as possible. Now, if I save this part, incomplete I know, but if I save this part, and let's go and put it back in the same folder as everything else. If I save this part, we can have a look at the file size, and in this case the file size is 156 kilobytes for a very simple smiley. Now, the macro that created that very simple smiley is 35 kilobytes. So you can see the file size is significantly smaller. I mean, that's virtually 1/5 of the size. The bigger your model, the more file space you save. Now, if we have a look up here, we've got 2 macros. SWB, this is an old format macro. If it won't run, what you do is you edit it and save it, and it converts it to an SWP. Now, this SWP is 382 kilobytes. And what we're going to do now is we're going to run it so you can see what you can download from various websites as macros. So if I choose Run, we're going to choose the SWP file and click Open. And this is going to run through, and it's going to create a whole load of bits and pieces automatically from the macro. Now, obviously, this is probably been tidied up after it was recorded very simply. And we'll let that finish through. It's going through all the various operations the designer intended. And then when it finishes, oh, it's jumped into the wrong assembly. Apologies, let me go and find it. It's created me an assembly of 4 components, which consists of a wheel, the bolt, the mounting bracket, and I can't remember what the 4th component is off the top of my head. Let's go and have a look. Oh, there we go, the bit on the end. There we go. So this was downloadable from a website or a customer sent it through and allows you very easily to transfer it. Now, that's 4 parts and an assembly created from one 300 kilobyte file. These individual parts would be much larger. So it can save a lot of space. If you're really struggling to send somebody something, this enables you to compress it much more quickly, particularly if people are downloading things from your website. Now, I want to jump into the macro that created this because I want to show you something which is different with 2013. So I'm just going to open that. Now, in SolidWorks 2013, they moved to using VBA 7 from VBA 6, 7.1 if you want to be exact. Now, VBA, you may find that if you had some old macros, they stopped running when you got to the new SolidWorks. And that's because of a change that was made outside SolidWorks' control to VBA 7. Now, VBA 7 in a private declare statement needs this PTR safe word added. And VBA, otherwise it won't understand the line, which is why these lines are red. Whereas VBA 6 won't understand what PTR safe is. And if you're looking at this in SolidWorks 2012, this group of lines would be red. If you're only ever going to use it in 2013, you can find the private declare lines and just add in PTR safe as I've done there. If you think your macro might be run on 13 or 12, then you need to add in this what's called a debug if loop, which debug because it's got the hash symbol on the front. And then if VBA 7, then do it with PTR safe, else do it with without end if. And that basically means that before the macro runs, it does what's called a compile. And these are then evaluated at compile time. So when it's compiling VBA 7, it does this. When it's compiling VBA 6 or earlier, it does this one. So it's just a very quick look at some very specific code. It's just something to be aware of that may be something you need to do. So a whole load of macros there, a whole load of stuff going on. Not too much in the code because it really can't cover it all in half an hour. There's a lot of functionality in SolidWorks. But something to note, you've seen here I've done stuff with weldments or the weldment cutlass functionality. We've done stuff in here using actual weldment structural members and creating parts. More creating parts and assemblies with macros here. When we were looking at creating assembly bombs, you can see how we can interact with the model. Saving stuff as DXF is not interacting with the model, it's just creating a sort of outside of SolidWorks, but using the SolidWorks Save As functionality to do the work. And then in the drawing, you've seen some very simple ones of getting your information out of SolidWorks into other formats, and also getting properties from one file format to another. So a very quick look at different aspects of macros. So if we jump back into there, thank you very much for watching. If you do have any questions, as usual, get in touch. You can email us or give us a ring. I'll be very happy to answer your questions. If there are any macros you've seen that you would like as is, feel free to give me an email. I'll be happy to send those out to you. If you've got any sort of custom macros that either you're writing would like some help with, or that you think would be useful for you guys and would need some time, it's something we're happy to do, but it's something we may well charge for depending on how complex the macros are. So just be aware of that. Looking forward, we've got some more webinars as always. Next week we're going to be looking at the customer portal and my.solidworks, which is a new bit of SolidWorks web space. On the 6th of June, we've got sheet metal parts from some imported geometry, so taking imported geometry and making sheet metal stuff from them. And 13th of June, we've got a sort of a demo session. Oh, apologise. We've got a demo session on modelling a spiral staircase in SolidWorks. So that'll be a nice one. If you do anything in spirals, I'd have a look at that, and it will give you a chance to either expand your skills, look at some different ways of doing stuff, or something that you can take and use pretty much wholesale in your own work. So last thing, are there any questions? If there are, feel free. There has been a question. Let me just have a quick look at that. Oh, yeah, thanks for that. Quick point that the smiley face apparently looks happier than a lot of his models. Glad I could help. Any other questions? No? Well, thank you very much for watching. As always, as I said, give us an email if you've got any questions in the future or you think of something as soon as close this down. But thank you very much for watching.